Welcome, everybody. We're back at MSP Confidential. It's another Friday. Today, we've got some great guests in Vivek Chabria and Tyler Moore, CEOs in residence at the Brydon Group. Guys, welcome. Thanks so much for coming to hang out. First off, what is a CEO in residence for this MSP crowd that might be wondering? That's kind of neat title.
Yeah, it's been a fun role. So Tyler and I were partnered with a really phenomenal firm called the Brydon Group, private equity firm with over $500 million of committed capital, founded by a group of combat veterans, two of which served in the military together. Third, a serial entrepreneur, and every year they back 6 to 8 mid-career operators like Tyler and myself, labeled CEOs in residence, essentially looking for a business to go buy and then play the role of the CEO in that business that gets acquired. So we're in residence, if you will, hoping to find a really great business and be stewards of that company for the foreseeable future.
So I think what landed us in this conversation is actually you may have set your sights obviously on a platform
Yeah,
play with some MSPs. So I'm
that's
kind of
right.
advertising the fact that you're looking, I guess, but
Okay.
you wouldn't be the only ones. I think a lot of folks have realized that there's an interesting play here in building out a platform-based MSP company. And so I'm curious from your early stage kind of sense of the market, why is this interesting to you guys at the moment? What's the thing that's calling you into this space at the moment?
Yeah, I'll start and Tyler, maybe you can add on as well. Um, Tyler and I, we both, background else for childhood best friends, grew up together. We both come from small business families. I've been, been able to really appreciate all that goes into running a small and mid-sized organization, as well as an enterprise company, given our corporate careers. But we believe that the MSP, especially in this age of AI, just has an incredibly exciting opportunity to help small and mid-sized companies make that AI transformation, while helping them protect their customers and teams from all of the cybersecurity concerns that are popping up in the world, especially given AI. And so I think we just get incredibly excited to be part of that movement, and why we're, I would say, so eager to really jump into this community and be part of it.
Yeah, truly, truly a challenge of our time, of our lifetime, no doubt.
Yeah, to
Tyler,
say the least.
go ahead, Tyler. Your
Oh yeah,
sense.
like Vivek said, we've known each other for I don't know, 20 some years now. So oftentimes he takes the words right out of my mouth. But yeah, no, I very similar to what he's mentioning. I've spent my career as a software engineer at Amazon before taking a little bit of a break and then joining the Brydon Group. I just have a really deep appreciation for technical challenges, small and large, whether it be a first day getting your employees set up on their computers to hey, we're building out enterprise level software challenges and how do we make sure everything is scaled correctly, has the right cybersecurity in place, is ready for all of the challenges that an upcoming business may face. And especially in this evolution of AI, we expect the amount of technology, much like everybody else is kind of asserting here too, to just really take off in the small and medium business market. So we're excited to be part of that change and hopefully help shepherd that along for a smooth ride versus a bumpy ride.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, smooth ride and bumpy ride, I think, have always been a part of the life of the MSP, and having maybe the privilege of a 25 or 30-year look back of what the industry's cycles kind of have looked like. And I suppose many industries have a bit of the same thing. They kind of go through the same cycles of learning and iteration, only to come back to kind of realize that, yeah, some folks have kind of moved up a bit of the ladder of operational maturity, capability, and all these things, but there's always new entrants. And in particular, this industry seems to always have new entrants because the barrier to entry is so low. And I'm curious how you guys see maybe the challenge of the wide spectrum of maturity in the industry as a thing. Obviously, for building out a platform, you're going to go and look for the more mature folks and stuff like that. And maybe the immature operators are a boon to the mature ones because it differentiates them in the market to some extent. Just curious your mindset on this a little bit.
Yeah, I'll kick it off of Vic and maybe you can
Yeah,
take
go
it
for
there.
it.
There's definitely a couple of different angles to this. I think one of the largest differentiating factors that at least we're subscribing to at the moment is that historically, I think MSPs have been able to be industry agnostic for the most part, and you'll see like pockets of verticalization, if you will. We think as this new wave of technology is kind of taking over this marketplace, the ability to serve your clients deep enough with enough expertise on like their specific challenges, which is really where AI is starting to shine. You're going to have to verticalize a little bit more, and in terms of making room for new entrants, the more specialization you have historically, I think in the MSP marketplace hasn't been quite as critical, but I think we're buying into the idea that more verticalization today is probably more prevalent than it has been in the past.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that real quick, I think like the use cases when you get into a specific industry or just require a better understanding of how that industry and business actually operates. I think often an MSP is, you know, served of the more horizontal technology needs across the business, and those generally are same industry to industry. But when you start getting to the level of questions of like, okay, I want to build a workflow that meets these HIPAA compliance requirements in healthcare or meets hey, these SEC compliance policies in the financial services sector, like you start to want a little bit more of, hey, we've delivered a solution like this to other players in the space before. We know what the watchouts are, and that's where I think an MSP, especially one that has that called subject matter expertise in a vertical that Tyler's describing, just ends up being incredibly powerful. And so that's where we get really excited to potentially buy a platform, potentially steer a company over the next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, you guys, I think mentioning verticalization is interesting. As ex McKinsey, you'll appreciate the difference between that and
Mm,
specialization. And it's interesting that some MSPs are actually verticalizing too. Not long ago, I
mm,
was chatting with an operation out of Houston, and they noticed that a lot of their clients who were commercial laundromats were using the same software, and then they went and found who the software vendor was, and they made a software play. And so they went acquired literally the software vendor that is in that space, and so that
mm.
is like true verticalization, I'd say. I think most MSPs are probably leagues away from the ability to do this kind of thing at scale across many industries, whether it's law, health and dental and so on and so on. But the specialization topic comes up so much. And maybe this is a perfect segue into a bit of the AI topic in the context of specialization, because nobody really has the skill set yet on
Mm.
what I would say perhaps the most critical piece of this, which is the actual enablement, the training, the education downstream for the end users, because MSPs have long kind of not necessarily been in that space specifically. One thing is technology deployment. Another very different thing is education, training, enablement. So I'm curious how you're seeing this as a play from the PE maybe angle, and whether that is really the next unlock for MSPs in the AI era is really that enablement, that education, that change leadership, if you will.
Yeah, maybe I'll start, and Tyler, you can jump on too. I think from the PE lens, or honestly from any lens, we think the entrants that are serving on AI that are going to win are likely the ones that are serving like full end-to-end need. And when I say that, I kind of think of it in parts. Like there's these open strategy questions, the ones that we'd be solving all the time at McKinsey around like, what do you go do? What is the problem statement that you're trying to go answer? What are the workflows you want to go design for? And there's this piece where we see a lot of new entrants, especially custom software dev shops that are leaning into
Mm.
building discrete use cases to go serve whatever that workflow need is. Then there's also that question around maintainability, right? Like the right answer is not let's just go deploy some software and good luck, hope it works out for the next 6 months. And that's where I think you also get some of that, what is the term, pilot purgatory that some companies are seeing, right? I think that the folks that are going to win are going to take that, I know we said vertical view, but almost like a horizontal view within a vertical, and really serve a customer on those at the full end with the goal being outcomes. And we can also probably spend another podcast talking about pricing, but like we also think that the best way for a AI partner or an MSP to be able to serve those customers is to align incentives, and we think that it's going to end up merging towards more outcome-based scenarios for customers. I know
I,
you have a lot of thoughts on this topic too, so
I'll
I'll let
let
you take.
Tyler jump in, but I definitely want to come
Yeah,
back to pricing. Like we will totally
yeah.
open that Pandora's box simply because every hype cycle comes with this very like monetization first approach to it. And so I
Right.
think the pricing always comes under fire in those conversations. So we'll come back to pricing, but Tyler, I'll let you go as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think part of your question was also, please cut me off if I'm not intended this way, but part of your question was like almost where do we start, right? Like this is such a new space evolving really rapidly. There's a really wide array of opportunity to go tackle. What's kind of beautiful about a lot of the early AI implementations is um, much like if you come from a programming world, like there's a really nice ramp to your first like hello world moment where you are able to have AI do something productive for you with relatively low effort. You don't have to understand the entire ecosystem out of the gates. So when you talk about if you're deploying Claude into your ecosystems, it's getting over that first hump of like, how do I write my first skill? And then once you start writing multiple skills, you might be like, oh, I want to start distributing these to my team. What does it look like to write a plugin that has multiple skills? And then how do I keep that in
Mm.
sync and have the right safeguards and then work on distributing that throughout? If I start giving edit rights to those across the entire team, how do I have a backstop or a eval library to make sure that we're having consistency there? So you have a nice segue in the sense that it's really easy to get an individual user, person, pilot program, whatever it may be, seeing results from some of the automation power that comes from AI. And then you very quickly, from what we've been talking to probably 300 some small business owners over the last year or so, see where that can snowball into further opportunity.
So hold on, because I'm hearing that maybe devs are the sleeper cells here of frameworks and understanding of like how to build something that doesn't become, I love that term, pilot purgatory hell. I call them zombie projects, technically
Yeah.
complete but dead on the inside. So there's a number of things here. Maybe your dev mind is helping you see through these frameworks and a bit of the necessary investment up front in building a process around some of this stuff, because like the Wild West is the Wild West. It's like everybody's rushing to try and monetize, quote unquote, or get the customer some sense of an outcome or ROI, and maybe struggling at it. If only they had helped the customer drive some habitual changes, some personality, corrections, and so on. Tell me a little bit about the dev mindset there, perhaps, Tyler.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny, you all actually, or you see it as like pilot purgatory. At Amazon, we would always joke that a proof of concept or POC would become prod, of course, or like production. So very quickly, a pilot program would be like on the critical path, and you'd have to go back and reinforce it and make sure that it had all the right reliability standards there. So I actually view it quite a bit different there. I would say my experience is more coming from an engineering background, engineering teams. Like very quickly, you can accidentally put something on critical path, and then you have to again reinforce it more so than getting stuck in that eternal pilot program. I'm sure there's some privilege there in terms of our familiarity with software itself and the ability to kind of build things in composable ways from there. I'm not sure that answers your question though.
Yeah, well, kind of what I was thinking back in my mind is a bit of the challenge that vibe coding is creating from a security standards perspective, the ability to maintain, an MSP vibe coding some solution for customer, launching it, and then really not having the capacity to maintain it over longer terms or cycles. So I think these are maybe issues that are right now solvable, but perhaps will compound into bigger issues because all the basics and standards and reliability was not there to begin with, because the knowledge is missing, obviously, from somebody that doesn't normally build software and now suddenly building these what seem like magical solutions for customers. So anyways, we're starting to see a little bit of this already, even customers themselves or SMBs, SMEs kind of tackling a bit of these experiments. And then obviously finding out the hard way when the whole thing goes down because of some database logging issue that could have no way been anticipated for scale. These are the types of things that I think are a little bit of undermining the process overall. And then people pull back and it's like, hold on, well, maybe we'll just go hire a developer now. So it'll be full cycle is what I'm predicting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's also a pretty clean divide on if it's internally facing or externally facing. And that's not to say that your internally facing tooling doesn't need to be reliable, but you certainly get a little bit more leeway, at least in terms of scale, when you're strictly internally facing. But as soon as it becomes critical path for your customers as well, like certainly it becomes a different risk calculation for you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the topics we kind of threw out on the invite to folks was this idea of crossing the line into trusted advisor status, and I'll be the first to say that that moniker is kind of always rubs me the wrong way because so many people are quote unquote trusted advisors, but I think MSPs are in this unique position of actually helping customers execute. And I see that more as a strategic advisor role, an operator role. And so there's a slightly different, maybe, level of access and input with customers there. But we're in this interesting time where obviously commoditization has driven a lot of the MSPs in this kind of race to the bottom, and strategy is not what it used to be. You know, a once a year infrastructure refresh
Sure.
conversation. Now there's a lot of different needs. And I think this is where MSPs are starting to find a little bit of resistance in terms of, okay, we didn't really build capacity into our pricing. We didn't build capacity into our model to really support a deeper
Yeah.
strategic engagement. Yet we kind of are required to be trusted advisors. I'll just ask you both from your experience as consultants, what is required to really go to the next level of the customer inviting you into their boardroom to sit at their table to look at the future? I feel this is earned, not guaranteed, of course.
Yeah, I think you framed it really nicely. Definitely earned. Uh, I mean, I come from the management consulting world. I spent my first 10 years at McKinsey, and my favorite part of the job was really trying to connect with business leaders who were going through some of the biggest operational challenges that they're trying to solve. And I think that's kind of what you have to think about as an MSP owner is the folks you're working with, they're experiencing some of the most change they've probably ever experienced in their business, given all that's happening in this world around macroeconomic conditions, but also AI. And I think you have to find ways, to your point, to earn trust. I have a framework for trust because every consultant needs a framework for everything, for better or worse. And it feels transactional when you try to put a formula on trust, but I think the components are super authentic. So it's this idea of reliability, credibility, intimacy, all come at with a low self-orientation. So just to maybe explain a little bit about that, I think credibility is like, when you like, why do I believe that you're someone who can like actually answer the questions that I have? And I think that actually speaks to some of the verticalization we're talking about. Like, do you really know my space, know my business, know my industry? There's this point around reliability. You said you were going to do something. Did you deliver on it every single
Mm.
time? There's this point around intimacy. Are you getting to know me as a human? Because at the end of the day, these trusted relationships are more than just about a bunch of business problems. They're about, a business leader navigating these business problems. And so getting to know that person on a human level is really important. And then self-orientation. Are you a jerk? More or less. Like, are you someone that I actually want to spend time with? If I was stuck at an airport, like, am I happy that I'm there with you waiting for that flight to take off? Just some of those personal elements. And so I think anytime you're looking at a new relationship or an existing relationship with a customer, I would use that framework. I would ask yourself those questions. Am I delivering on all four of those components? And if not, where can I lean in more? Which part of that framework matters most to the person that I'm talking to? And I think that's a helpful structure to kind of think about those relationships. I'll get off my consulting framework soapbox
No,
for a
no, I
second,
love it.
Tyler.
This was unprompted, but you're referring, of course, to the trustworthiness formula in the book, The Trusted Advisor, which is such a great read,
Right.
and really digs into all these concepts in a super interesting way. On the self-orientation piece, and just to recap what you said, credibility, reliability, and intimacy divided by self-orientation is the trust formula. And what I kind of normally talk about being self-orientation is this maybe MSP centricness. to conversations, because
Yeah.
for a long time the industry has said, oh, operational maturity, you're stacking your standards. If customers don't fit your requirements, then they can't be customers. And so MSPs have been showing up for 20 years, kind of with this MO of like, hey, it's all about our standards and our tech stack, and if you don't do it our way, see you later. This is what comes
Right.
across as self-orientation, which is really hard to build trust. And so the lower the trust is, the more you remain in the vendor category, which of course is a problem for long-term retention, long-term expansion, and all these other issues. So I love this topic. If folks haven't read this and you're wondering, how do I build a framework around us? Another thing you said, Vivek, it hit so hard. It can feel so schemy or manipulative to think about a framework around trust. But it's really not that. It's really the elements of what are the things that we need to work on to make sure we are communicating with the customer in a way that they feel seen, that they feel heard, that brings us into their environment, their narrative, their language, their insider status. That is the thing that gets us back in the boardroom every single time. So love the mention. Totally rad framework, and everybody should be thinking about this all the time. Tyler, anything to add? I know this is maybe something you've come across too, even from the more technical perspective. This is a mindset that I think a lot of MSP owners struggle with, because they come at these things from a technical owner mindset as well. And sometimes the dichotomy of these things is not easy to digest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In terms of adding something to that, I think I'd focus on starting small where possible, and kind of working your way up. So you mentioned early on, like, you don't want to show up, or it's difficult to get into that first board meeting where you're sitting with the owner of a company to kind of talk IT strategy. Certainly, there's an element of early due diligence to the best of your abilities. Like, can you get a hold of any of the current employees that are kind of going through some of the issues on the ground? Like, how can you start to get grassroots understanding of some of the problems, especially when you're new to either an industry, it's a new client, you're not quite sure how they're operating. There's completely new technology stacks that are coming into play. So to walk into some of these situations, obviously you got your trust component, but just from a knowledge component as well, and making sure that you're actually prepared for those accordingly. Like the existing frameworks today for what you're bringing to the table may or may not be the best fit. So you can start small with some early experiments, back and forth conversation, understand what they've tried versus not tried, and then build confidence so you have a better picture of what you're bringing when it does come time for those larger meetings.
Yeah, ironically, I do find, and even in my own travels, that whenever I pulled something off the table, be like, I don't think this is a good fit for you guys, actually is more trust building than, constantly trying to position new things, of course. But I'm going to maybe go off on a tangent here for a sec. You guys are young guys. If you were at McKinsey a long time ago, you were even younger guys then. And I want to maybe talk about one aspect of this credibility piece that I think is also difficult, because here's the context. MSPs have long been taught, get out of the business so you can work on it, not in it. And one of these things means that they put people into roles like those of account management or VCIO or that customer facing relationship. And one of the biggest struggles, I think, is actually that credibility piece. What does this 28-year-old know about my business? And I'm curious, if there were specific things, ideas, frameworks that you developed around, and obviously the trust piece is important, but specifically around how do I even get an at-bat with a business owner that could be twice my age and who already doesn't believe a thing I say?
I think part of what is resonating there, if you look at the news cycle today or LinkedIn or whatever, you're seeing some of the demonstrations of AI. There's a lot of talk. I'm like, oh, like I got AI to do X, or like my entire business is overhauled, or we're AI native, whatever that means. But they don't really have the results to show for that. They're really not walking through the exact demonstrations of what they've done, or really providing some
The
nuance
proof.
to like, hey, this wasn't an easy one shot solution, but we actually had to trip over a couple things, and showing some of those battle scars, for lack of a better word, to build up some of that like portfolio effectively. I think that's really powerful, to focus on showing, not telling, especially when there's skepticism on can they actually deliver on that front. And sometimes just being AI native, if you will, within your own company, and really highlighting exactly how you're doing that and what you've had to overcome to achieve that. That by itself, I would imagine, would resonate with owners to build some of that initial trust.
I'm curious, in your big consulting firm days, did you ever have to study other people's previously delivered successful projects as a way to really figure out how to translate these things? I'm just curious about that, process or MO specifically.
Yeah, you mean like other work that McKinsey maybe did for other clients in those situations, or
Yeah, because if
what
you're
do
a
you mean
new
exactly?
consultant, you kind of have no proof under your own belt to come
Oh,
and
that
show
way.
in
Yeah.
in building that relationship. But you can speak obviously from the company lens, and here are the things that we are capable of delivering on. And I think this is when maybe the unlock for somebody in that client relationship facing role at an MSP is, hey, we as a group have this incredible bench and
Mhm.
expertise. Here are the stories of some of the things we've done as a team. And so I'm just curious, because a lot of it is so personal relationships and the trust that it's easy to kind of focus on the personal story and not so much the we story. But I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
digressing because there's a lot to maybe unpack there. But curious if you had to study other people's work to be able to speak about the we.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's definitely a component of it. There's obviously things you have to be sensitive around on sharing work you do for other clients, but I think at large, like being able to speak to the kind of impact that you've been able to have, especially under other industries, I think can be quite powerful too. Um, like it's clear that Tyler and I did not spend the last decade working in an MSP environment, but have spent a lot of time working in industries that MSP clients might serve. My experience in McKinsey range everything from working with CPG clients to financial services to insurance. And so I've gotten the chance to spend, maybe it's only, 1 to 2 year stints in those industries, but a pretty deep level of time in specific industries and typically on the problems that mattered most in those spaces, because that's typically the type of problem that McKinsey got brought in to help. But I also definitely would double click on your point around the we. Tyler and I, we started this journey a year ago. I've been itching for an opportunity to work with Tyler specifically, and Tyler's been able to solve some incredibly impressive reliability engineering problems at Amazon. And I think anytime you can build a bench around you that has been able to have experience in all these different areas, you're able to just move with a lot more momentum and be able to speak to just a lot more impact that you're able to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. Getting the band back together. I love it. You guys, do you anticipate like what your old age conversations might sound like if you're still hanging out 20, 25 years, 30 years from now? What are the nuisances of the other person that you'll be fighting over on a day-to-day basis? And feel free to lay it all out right here. This is therapy session. Therapy is in session here.
I'll let you start that one.
Yeah. It's funny. I think we forward looking, we typically talk about Vivek's daughter in terms of like, I wonder what like education, or like, is she gonna have a need a driver's license like in 18 years, whatever it's gonna be. So I would say most of our forward looking conversations have actually kind of been scoped around Vivek having a 18-month-old. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and trying to predict what life will be like for her. Um,
Wow.
Vivek, does that stir any particular conversations in mind?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll be a little vulnerable for a second. Like, I obviously just said, hey, I'm really excited to work for Tyler, but I was also really nervous about it, and nothing to do with Tyler. Like, I think you're lucky in this lifetime to get 5 or 7 like super deep meaningful friendships, and the decision to go decide to work with your best friend is like one that you should not take lightly. Like obviously you're one looking for someone who complements you in all the right ways. You mentioned when you're in your old age, reflecting back, what are the nuisances you talked about? And my biggest fear is like you weren't having those conversations, right? Like there's plenty of stories of friends and founders who come together and the business like tears them apart. Tyler and I spent a considerable amount of time before we started this journey talking about like what mattered to both of us over the next 5 years. We've been very open about giving each other feedback on like the processy things, but also like the bigger things that matter. We've all said things like, in this decision, I'm Team Tyler or I'm Team Vivek because for each other, of course, because we felt that that mindset was also super important. I mean, my dream would be 20 years from now, and I'm looking back and sharing a drink with Tyler, and we're reflecting on all of the multiple cool things that we got to do together. That would be a dream come true.
Yeah, there's no pun I can segue that with other than to
Okay.
say what a lovely sentiment, and I wish we could all be in a place where we have somebody like that to work with for however long, and be able to share that kind of experience. So good on you guys. Um, Tyler, now that Vivek was a little more vulnerable, it's time for you to tell me what you would be annoyed with a few years down the road, because you kind of skirted the question the first time around.
Yeah, what I would be annoyed with down the road. On a lighter note, Vivek and I, him coming from McKinsey and myself coming from Amazon, from the onset, we've had way too much time spent debating like, should this be a memo or a PowerPoint? On a lighter note, we just have fundamentally different views on the delivery mechanism there for a lot of presentational work and delivering the knowledge value to an end recipient. But on a deeper note, what would frustrate me? I don't know. Candidly one of the easiest people to get along with. So we really haven't had arguments in the last year that we've been serious. Like we've had intellectual sparring, if you will. We'll disagree on topics and kind of sort through that. But we have yet to uh, rub shoulders with each other in a way that like it's um, been ill received or troublesome in any dimension. Um, so candidly, like I hope that we don't find annoyances with each other on serious topics. But there's certainly differences in our delivery models that I'm sure we'll have opinions on, and that jokingly will be a thorn in each other's side.
Yeah,
My
think there's
summary
something about.
will literally be called, "Should this be a memo or a PowerPoint?" I think that's great. Yeah, yeah. If you had to leave it to one thing to kind of break the tie, I love that. Well, speaking of intellectual sparring, because I think this is an interesting thing that MSPs actually do quite a bit, given the way that the community shows up, the types of conversations that are had. This inherent sense that everybody has of wanting to raise the tide across the board for everybody, whether it's from a security perspective or just being there for
Mm,
the community. And it's great to see when we get out to some of the events and conferences. Vivek, you and I didn't get a chance to connect, but I know you were in Chicago last week for Evolve, and so
yeah.
you probably got to see a bit of what this community in action is. The ConnectWise folks, they have their Evolve community, and so I want to ask you maybe what topics are on your hot list of intellectual sparring that maybe have been interesting to unravel and just kind of dig deeper into. Because I'm interested in, obviously, the PE lens. How do you solve for this long-term relationship that you want to build with MSPs right now to build a platform in the future? And so what's kind of on the intellectual sparring hot list?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with a couple, and Tyler, you can jump in too. I think it, like right now, as we're trying to find a platform, and we talked a little about verticalization. There's like definitely some open questions around like where are the industries where we think that the need for deeper IT MSP services are going to be greater. That's probably one that we've gone back and forth on. Um, in terms of the service offerings that an MSP has, I think there is a little bit of this conflict between what level of service do you offer in the customers you serve. And we've talked a lot about going and building custom AI products for clients, but we've also talked a lot about being a trusted advisor. And it's a little bit tough to be that like solution agnostic vendor while also delivering software or service
Mm.
for a customer. And so like that's one thing that Tyler and I have continued to debate a little bit. I think one that maybe we don't debate, but unclear yet, like what's the level of depth you should go is in cyber. I think there is plenty of great off-the-shelf software and solutions that you can go and leverage. There's definitely some tailorization needed for specific industries. Figuring out that level of depth that you go and serve customers on is probably one that an MSP would probably spend some time sparring with their customers on. To be honest, I think there are some customer bases that are less concerned about cyber issues or data breaches, but there are those that lean into it a little bit harder, and so that I could see leading to some back and forth. Those are just a couple of the themes that maybe
Yeah.
that come top of mind. Tyler, I know you'd add.
Yeah, the only one I would add to that is almost uncertainty around like the rate of evolution. So
Mm.
I think there's quite a bit of debate on like, well, yeah, the AI solution for X like doesn't quite fit my need today, but everyone's promising that it's accelerating 1,000x every month. Like certainly it'll solve my problem by tomorrow, or the next month, next year. So I'm not going to invest in it. So trying to tease that apart, I think, is a common tension on. There are certainly areas where like AI just really has gotten a lot better, quarter over quarter, year over year. And then there are other aspects to the nuances of like your specific situation that like realistically it's going to take quite a bit more time for that to catch up to speed, or it just requires a deeper integration. And trying to figure that out so you can find the right investment opportunities that won't just be washed away. But
Mm.
even then, I think we're both a pretty big proponent of it's better to try something than nothing at this point in time. So even if some of that does end up getting eaten up by more general purpose platforms, those investments into specific solutions, like you're going to learn things along the way that are probably pay dividends and allow you to tackle more complex challenges that you didn't necessarily think were possible earlier on.
So this maybe technical lens that you have, Tyler, will be interesting because just yesterday I was kind of watching this LinkedIn thread unfold where
Mhm.
there was a conversation around maturity, specifically around cybersecurity. And I think to the point of like, what depth do you go to on your specific levels of expertise on certain things? Some would argue that when it comes to cybersecurity, any level that is, more shallow than where it needs to be, and where it needs to be could be debated, I suppose, is materially underserving the customer because like the needs of cybersecurity are not going to give you a pass because your expertise was not up to snuff to deliver what the customer actually needed to prevent a situation. And so there was kind of this conversation around, should you not even try because is it really against the grain of properly serving customers to deliver the service at a level that it's not up to snuff? And so I'm curious, from your technical perspective, how you see that, especially around cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all starts with awareness. And just to kind of anchor this to a specific example that might be useful, there's a ton of solutions out there for how you protect your data, how you isolate it, how you make sure that it doesn't leave boundaries. But if you look at common tools like MCP servers, right? So if you run ChatGPT, Claude, and you connect it to another data source, whether it be your CRM or another tool, like typically it's connecting through MCP servers. What a lot of folks don't realize, and I've even like caught myself almost tripping up on this in the past, but just with a cybersecurity mindset, you're able to kind of see around some of these corners because of awareness. But one of the common things that comes along with these MCP servers is, hey, explain your intent when you're asking for information. And that intent is not coming from you, it's coming from your conversation with Claude or ChatGPT or whatever it might be. So you might think like, oh, I'm going to this external data source and I'm just asking for information on X, but it's not only that, and also, by the way, this is what the user is like thinking about right now. And like, hopefully that will return a better response. And that's a really easy example of like, hey, you might be using a tool what you think in a way that you think is innocuous, but you could actually be leaking potentially confidential information that is like in your chat history, because with these MCP servers, oftentimes they're asking for intent for a query. So just like those pieces of awareness, I don't necessarily think a lot of business owners have today, and like those simple examples can help start to highlight like, oh, it's actually worth investing in some solution or technology now that I understand like all of these different holes that can come into play and some that I've probably already stepped in.
Yeah. Is there maybe like a cultural problem that we have in North America around this idea of don't tell me what to do, and how much these MCP servers and AI and LLMs in general actually need guardrails for specifically this type of scenario? And you might be opinionated on guardrails and whether people need to actually get a little bit more educated and aware on guardrails and how to really speak the language of guardrails, which is not again culturally. I don't think it's something that we do. We want to be unburdened, free to do whatever we want because freedom.
Yeah. I am certainly a proponent of needing them. In terms of folks' receptiveness to it, I don't know. We had a saying in the reliability engineering world of Amazon of never waste a good crisis. So in some cases that would often happen. Like there was an outage in a particular fault scenario on the retail side of Amazon where I worked, and then as a byproduct, all of a sudden, all of the services that historically you've had trouble working with were a little bit more receptive to like, hey, like actually there is some reliability risks over here. So in some capacity, you almost have to have folks be bitten by it at least once. Ideally, you can show them here's some common mishaps that like you're probably susceptible to today, or if you've not already accidentally stepped in that arena. But certainly, yes, I do buy into the need for guardrails and the challenges around convincing folks that they are worth deploying.
I just had a brilliant idea. I consider all my own ideas to be brilliant. You guys remember the little Japanese game where you had to feed something? Yeah, and you kind of
Tamaguchi, is that what it
the
was?
Tamaguchis. Yes, the Tamaguchis.
Yeah, that's right.
It just occurred to me this would be a great training ground for MSPs if there's like cybersecurity aguchi game where they just have to be on call all day long for the customer, and like random cybersecurity incidents pop up on this thing, and they learn how to handle these. Because I feel like again the mindset and the resilience and all these things, it's trial by fire. Obviously, you don't
Mhm.
become resilient by not being uncomfortable. You kind of have to go through a bit of the walking on the fire coals type of thing. So I love the idea. Somebody's going to come up with that. I'm pretty sure. Cybersecurity in a
Yeah.
pocket, and this will be your pager duty will ping you at 3 a.m. with a random incident that you have to at least select from a multiple choice thing. How would you solve this right now, and see if it gets you at least thinking in the right place. Anyways, I diverge. I love this topic though, and I think I promised to come back to the pricing model conversation because
Mm.
you mentioned the pricing being a challenge. This is something I've been talking about a lot lately with a lot of folks because this industry was built on a billing model that kind of hasn't really evolved a whole
Mhm.
lot, and the model allowed for a strategic conversation that basically was a once a year infrastructure refresh. And so now that
Mhm.
strategy needs are so different, MSPs find themselves trying to wedge strategy and the capacity that goes along with it, or the need for capacity and people and resources that go along with it, into this existing billing model of this per device or per user type of pricing. And then immediately hitting these glass ceilings of capacity and capability. And obviously, just kind of defaulting back to an MRR based segmentation. It's like, oh, well, we'll spend some time with our top customers and everybody else just gets the short end of the stick. So tell me your opinions on pricing and how it needs to evolve to really support like a proper move into a strategic level advisory conversation and relationship with customers longer term.
Yeah, this is a fun one to unpack. And I'd be honest, I'd be lying if I said Tyler and I had all the answers on this one. I think you've characterized it well. It feels like today, this managed services, pay per workstation, per seat, per license, however you want to describe it, tends to be the common norm. You see MSPs leaning into obviously also pricing for discrete a la carte services and software that they're reselling, and then you also of course see project based one time help me go and implement this specific tech stack or do this specific project. I think the reason it hasn't evolved is because the the case or the context for each company is so different. I think broadly, Tyler and I see, and Tyler, correct me if you disagree, of course, is that you are going to see more outcome-based endpoints in terms of these pricing models. It's going to be very challenging to do. And again, I know we keep saying vertical, but like it will be easier when you can define like what success looks like by industry for specific use cases. But today, I think until we're able to show like true outcomes from deploying AI that are sustainable over a period of time and also require a fair amount of like maintainability and reliability, the pricing model I think will struggle to evolve. But once that inflection point happens, which I think Tyler and I again spar on the timeline, but I think is inevitable. I think that is when you will start to see the shift towards customers no longer wanting to just maybe pay a recurring managed services fee and actually pay for sustainable outcomes, whether it be reliability based or productivity based or sales uplift based. It depends on the nuance, but that's sort of how I characterize the arc that we're expecting. Tyler, feel free to violently disagree with me if you see it otherwise.
Yeah,
No,
fight him in the comments.
No, absolutely. I mean, Vivek is the consultant of the two of us, so pricing conversation is definitely more of his bread and butter than mine. But yeah, I think he mentioned that we spar on the timeline of it. I think generally and broadly speaking, I tend to be more bullish on the acceleration of that timeline, and I think Vivek has what is probably more realistic expectations in the long run. But broadly, everything he said, I agree with.
Yeah. Maybe one of the aspects that I think is so interesting about an AI era pricing model is perhaps a forced transparency around pricing. And I think we've seen this with some of the big consulting firms who went and touted all their efficiencies as a result of AI, but weren't really dropping the bills for customers. And then one of them got sued. I can't remember who was, Deloitte maybe. And so this is likely to also happen in the MSP world because I think as some of the platforms scale, they become super AI centric and able to deliver at a better scale with AI. I think this should naturally drive prices down to some extent. I think also the supply chain is showing signs of this, whether the storage costs, the compute costs, quantum is maybe going to drive some incredible leap in efficiency that immediately reduces your token utilization cost. There's so many little angles to this that are so hard to predict, but I think the overall arch of this is that transparency might kind of become non-negotiable around pricing if it's specifically outcome-based. And Vivek, if you've had thoughts on this transparency kind of entering the market, entering the chat, so to speak, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. Transparency in this space, I think, is super hard. We like see corollaries in other industries where it's like a little bit more clear. I spent a lot of my time at McKinsey looking at back office service operations, contact centers, where the deliverable was, did you contain the call? You answered the customer's question without it leading to, being routed to a contact center where, someone spent 8 to 15 minutes trying to answer that question. And in those sorts of use cases, it's a lot easier to price outcomes transparently because you can show, a baseline and then a current state based on the intervention that was made. I think with an MSP where you're really solving a couple of different problems, like there is this question around uptime and reliability that you're solving for. There's this piece around being able to lean into more productivity lifts. Those that are going to be able to create transparency, again, be specific about the use case they're solving for, I think will be the ones that are able to navigate the shift to outcome-based pricing, where unclear to me who wins in that scenario yet, given all the dynamics you just described. Like, I think in a world like that actually could also drive value down to the MSP. I think in a world where you're taking on a larger aperture of their services, it could drive value up. It really depends on how you play it. But that's the problem, at least. I feel like I didn't give you a great answer, but that's at least the problem that has to be solved to make that evolution.
Here's a wild prediction. I feel there will be a service catalog item that will show up on price lists called human in the loop. There'll be a fee for human in the loop because the customer opted for the cheaper AI only resolution to their problem.
Mm,
But it turns out
yeah.
now they actually needed or wanted a human in the loop. And so humans will become, a commodity again. Anyways, this is a super interesting conversation. And as we get close to the top of the hour, maybe not
Mm,
worth trying to unpack or blow up right this second, but maybe we'll have you guys back to talk about this pricing and pricing
always.
transparency specifically. Um, I want to maybe ask a question around it was one of the things that we talked about this idea of corporate entrepreneurship. And I think MSPs, I was having a conversation this morning with the team. We do this regular thing at SkillPad called MSP School, and we have a lot of MSP DNAs, you could call it, at SkillPad. So we always try to inculcate a bit of this insider understanding of what it's like to be an MSP, what are some of the growth challenges. And one of the things we talked about is this maybe sense of identity, or what if this industry is so hard and so difficult and that so much cynicism exists, what do you think keeps MSPs engaged? And so one of the things that I kind of contributed, having been one myself, is this idea that, the sense of identity, doing right by the customer. There's like a art of the craft of doing great work, and all these things kind of keep us going. But then the sheer inertia of it is also a thing. You kind of get into this state of mind where you just go, and customer and the problems never relent, and you just do whatever needs to be done, and this becomes kind of this heroic complex that is something that needs to be addressed. In parallel to all of that, you're trying to be entrepreneurial, grow a business,
Mm,
do this thing that kind of requires a little bit of a removing yourself from this high stakes personal delivery of service to some extent. And
mm,
having transitioned a bit from that to now this corporate world, to talking to MSP owners who are maybe very squarely in this challenged identity issue, curious kind of what are your thoughts on some of this detachment, if you will, of this identity in order to actually be able to help a business grow, or if they should just double down on this as a differentiator.
yeah. The word I think I have the most reaction to is detachment. Like Tyler said, we've spoken to probably 300 business owners over the last year, which has been probably one of the best parts of this experience, is just getting to see how different owners attack running their business. And there's definitely some that lean into being really tied into the day to day. Like, I'm going to solve customer problems. That is my identity. I am the sales champion for our business. And then there are those that are more focused on, pulling the dials of their business and trying to think through some of the more strategic questions. I hate to say it, and Tyler and I expect this to be the case for when we start running a business together, is you have to do both, and you have to figure out the right time to do both. And there are times when you have to lean into option one, when there is a crisis that's both a challenge, but also the biggest opportunity. Are you leaning in to like really solve that problem? But also, if you take your eyes off the prize in terms of understanding where things are going in your space or the customers you're trying to serve, I think you risk missing out as well. And so it's a bit of this hybrid ownership model that you kind of have to take on if you're gonna to be successful. I don't think it's one or the other personally.
Yeah, interesting take. Tyler, your thoughts?
Yeah, what I would add to that is having the right folks that you can lean on and trust is wildly important in this context. So,
Yeah.
Vivek and I, depending on what we're tackling for the week or the month, we'll kind of just block and tackle as needed together, right? So if being able to lean fully on someone and say like, "Hey, I need X done. Can you take care of it?" And just know that the answer is yes, and you don't really have to check on it. It is really impactful. So having that team on deck, and I would equate some of that to, if I think back from when I was a individual contributor, software engineer, then grew into a manager that was leading a larger organization at Amazon. Like you've that transition for the first time from an individual contributor to a manager feels very similar to what you're describing in terms of like if I don't know every line of the code base or I don't know all the intricacies of this particular problem, like how could I manage the area if I lose sight of that? And you learn when to go deep, where to go deep, and then when to pull back, you can really lean on and trust. But that it takes some time to build and might have to be a talent equation you have to solve for if you don't have that today.
Yeah. Guys, incredible insights. I so appreciate you bringing a bit of this conversation to this space and this audience. Thank you so much. Folks, this has been Vivek Chabria and Tyler Moore, CEOs and residents at the Brydon Group. I know you guys are having conversations with MSP owners, thinking about a platform. Anybody out there wanting to just, bend their ear, definitely they can find you on LinkedIn, certainly, the Brydon Group, and yeah, reach out to them and chat. In the meantime, thank you so much again. We're here every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern for MSP Confidential. I definitely hope to have you back to unpack this pricing conversation a little bit more, because it's worth putting some of those McKinsey frameworks around it if possible. Get some of these ideas transplanted into the MSP space. Hang out backstage for a sec, guys. Thank you so much.